Hello, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. So for today, I want to talk to you about how you can really rest in the summer holidays, how you can really switch off, really rest, recover, reset, re-energize yourself. Not just so that you can go back in September feeling stronger and more empowered in terms of your mental health and well-being, but how you can also enjoy your summer holidays and get everything out of it that you want to. So if you are based in the UK, almost everyone here is now officially on their summer holidays, which I know everyone is very, very glad about. And I've had loads of questions around how do I switch off when I am struggling to? How do I make sure that I don't just collapse and spend the summer on the sofa? How do I make sure that I get the bits done that I need to for school, but actually enjoy myself and go back feeling, as I said, stronger, empowered with mental health and well-being? So that's the focus of today. Now, we know as educators that there is a very specific type of tiredness that we feel as we go into the summer holidays. And we talked about it a little bit in the last episode, so I don't want to spend too long on it today, but it's a type of tiredness that as school staff, we only we can understand. It's this overwhelming exhaustion that almost feels like it's in your bones. It's this foggy headed feeling as you start to struggle to think straight. There's almost like a busyness in your brain as your mind kind of starts to race ahead to what needs doing in the holidays and what needs doing around the house and what needs doing for September. And it's not just the physical and mental toll of teaching that leads to it. Like we explored last time, there are loads of other factors as well. There's the decision fatigue, that perpetual need for patience, the emotions that we absorb, the adrenaline overload and the chronic buildup of cortisol and what happens with that. There's all these different factors that go into it. And I think because of all the above, we run the risk of, as I say, completely collapsing when we do finally reach the holidays and any holiday, these much needed breaks. We're not really resting so much with this. It's more like we're just crashing out. But what I find really interesting, and I'm going to use myself as my own best example here because it's exactly what I did for the vast majority of my teaching career. What's really interesting is that even after a chaotic term in school, we often expect ourselves to be able to just switch off at a moment's notice now that it's just suddenly the summer holidays. And that's a little bit like driving at 100 mile per hour down the motorway, pulling up the handbrake and trying to swing the car into a parallel park. Like it's probably going to end up in disaster. And for me, it would always look like a 3 to 5 day Netflix binge, followed by this lovely lethargy and this lovely layer of self-loathing that would come as part and parcel of that. But sometimes it would go the other way. I would overcommit to social plans. I'd try to catch up with loved ones and friends and family that I hadn't seen in months. Or I would kind of put off taking a break at all. I'd decide to deep clean the house and curate the kitchen cupboards and post all the clothes that I needed to onto Vinted or do a boot sale or whatever before I slowed down. I'd almost use rest as a bit of a reward. So across my career, how I would choose to spend this first chapter of the summer holidays, it did vary a little bit, but there was a theme of either completely collapsing or trying to keep going at 100 miles an hour. And there was also those times where I would almost stay in school mode. I would treat most of the holiday as a chance to catch up. It sends shivers up my spine when I hear teachers using those phrases. Oh, I'm just going to catch up this weekend. I'm just going to catch up this holiday. Because the truth is, that's life. That's life we're using. That's life we're missing out on just to kind of get ahead with school. And don't get me wrong, I completely understand it. I know how crazy September is. I know that there is almost no one who got to the end of their to-do list at the end of July. And I understand that having this time in this headspace can be really helpful. And don't get me wrong, there are certain things we want to do in the summer. But as long as we are not completely sacrificing our summer to work, then we can start to put a bit of a balance there. I used to have this feeling of if I just get this done, then I'll be able to switch off. And if any of what we've already said today sounds familiar, then first and foremost, you are not alone. And I want to talk you through how you can really rest now that you have reached that break. I want, however, to begin by first of all shifting how you're thinking about rest in the first place, because the truth is rest is best when it isn't something you think of doing at the end or when your to-do list is neatly ticked off and no one needs anything from you. Because if that were the case, we would never, as teachers and school staff, we would never rest at all. The best way, the best reframe, and I wrote this in the book, the best reframe that I've ever seen, heard about rest is to think about rest like charging your phone. You wouldn't run your phone to zero by 9 a.m. every day and expect it to somehow work perfectly by magic in the afternoon. And we also tend to charge our phones at night ahead of when we use it. And that's the reframe. Think about rest as the first step in the productivity cycle, if you like, not something that you do if you get time. It's something you must do before you expect yourself to think clearly or have patience or be in a great mood. Think of rest as the thing that comes before the productivity, so to speak. And my favorite definition of rest is when you stop using a part of you that's used up, worn out, damaged, or inflamed so that it has a chance to renew itself, sorry. And I love that. Rest is when you stop using a part of you that's used up, worn out, damaged, or inflamed so that it has a chance to renew itself. That's what we want to do. We want to pull back from certain ways of giving, certain ways of either being productive or certain ways of output, I guess. Maybe it's we don't want to get up at 5-6 a.m. every single day, or maybe it's we don't want to work 8 hours a day in the summer, or maybe it's that we want to have more time to ourselves and maybe not spend all of our summer giving, or even being with other people. We can sometimes feel guilty for wanting to be on our own sometimes, but that's what it is. We pull back so that we can push forward at other times. So it is that first part in that productivity cycle. And really, the second key reframe here is that rest isn't necessarily about doing nothing. Sometimes you have to be active in your rest. In fact, according to Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith, there are 7 types of rest. And I've talked about this on the podcast before. And yes, 7 types of rest is a lot, and it is quite an overwhelming amount. But let's really quickly break these down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these into a bit more of a practical framework for you. I call it the R.E.N.U.E framework that you can use to help you factor in the rest you need. So those 7 types of rest that Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith outlines. We've got physical rest, and that can be active or passive. So that could be walking, stretching, could be taking a nap, so a bit more passive. That could be yoga, or again, very passive, spending an afternoon on the sofa. Like, don't get me wrong, I always have a duvet day as part of my holidays, at least one. But I know that actually, if I do that every day, I'm not going to feel rested by the end of it. So it's something I use in moderation. The second type of rest is mental rest, and that can be brain breaks away from solving problems. It could be incorporating some kind of mindfulness practice, even if it's just focusing on your coffee just for a minute whilst you have a drink first thing in the morning. Or it simply could be simplifying your day as a way to kind of reduce your decision fatigue and the amount of decisions you have to make during the day. The third one is then our emotional rest. And this might be talking really honestly and openly with someone who actually listens. It could be journaling without a prompt. It could be exploring your thoughts. It could be even communicating and saying what you actually feel, even if only to yourself, again, with journaling or something like that. Or even, like we said earlier, reducing your exposure to emotionally charged experiences or people who might drain you emotionally. And it's okay to say that, other people in our lives are going through some really hard stuff. We have to be there for other people at certain times, but it's also important that we're honest and appreciate that actually takes it out of us as well. And it's nothing against anyone else. It's just the fact that we're human and we're not robots. Then we have sensory rest. Now, this might be really simply switching off screens, dimming the lights down, turning off the noise, tuning out some of that noise, and kind of letting our central nervous system settle. And you know that I'm a huge fan of nature and getting outside, and that can be great for it as well. We have creative rest. Really, really simple ways: a walk in nature, lighting a candle, having a bit of a doodle and a bit of a draw maybe. Could be even just noticing the colors in the sky at sunset, going to somewhere you don't normally go and exploring, which we're going to come back to later. It could be just slowing down the pace of your day and giving your brain space to think. Sometimes that's stimulus for creativity. And when we say creativity, we're not talking about just music and art and drawing and things like that. We're talking about problem solving. Problem solving uses up so much of our creative brain. And as adults in 2025, we do a heck of a lot of problem solving each and every day. Then the final 2, we have social rest and spiritual rest. So spiritual rest is simply feeling connected to something bigger than yourself. And it could be a community, a cause, a charity, a group. That might be religious or otherwise. It might be through mindfulness. It might be through a club. It could be through anything like that. And then social rest. Sometimes some of us are people who are recharged by being around others. Others, if you're like me, find that quite depleting and actually can only have we have a very short, finite social battery and actually recharge better on our own. So, whatever type of person you are, whether you recharge with others or by yourself, just knowing that and having that awareness so that you can fill up that social battery. And as I said earlier, the most important thing to remember is that these are the first part in that cycle. Rest is the first part, and you don't need to tackle all of them at once. In fact, if you're, as I said, if you're anything like me, even just thinking about, I've got to get 7 types of rest in this summer, that's exhausting. Like that is a lot. A really good rule of thumb can just be to start off with today, noticing which ones of those 7 types of rest you feel you're most lacking in and starting there. However, as you know, I like to keep things very, very practical. I like to try and keep things bite-sized, manageable, and not overwhelming. So to do that, I use something with our clients called the R.E.N.U.E model. R.E.N.U.E, because I couldn't fit a W into the acronym, basically. And we use this especially during the holidays. And by looking at these categories and fitting them into a flexible framework across your break, you can rest assured, see what I did there, that you are ticking off the various types of rest that you need. So here is the R.E.N.U.E framework. The first one, really simply, stands for rest. Just like that we've just gone through, rest, active and passive. Real rest isn't just about lying in bed until 10 a.m. or watching Netflix in your pajamas for hours on end. And that might feel good for a day or two, but for most of us, it doesn't actually leave us feeling any better. If anything, we end up feeling more sluggish, more groggy, and more frustrated that we've wasted a day. 1 or 2 days across the summer, maybe even 3 or 4 spread throughout, is absolutely fine. Those days are important. You need that. But every day probably isn't going to help. Rest can be active and rest can take effort. That is okay. It might be stretching. It might be going for a walk. It might be listening to some calming music. And if you know me at all, you know that I love Lord of the Rings, and that soundtrack is one of my favorites. Could be journaling, giving yourself time to do something more slowly without rushing to the next task. You already know what is restful for you. You don't need me to tell you that. But this is about you giving yourself the permission to actually do it and to stop treating rest like something that you have to earn first, because you don't. The second letter is E, explore. Now, this might be my favorite one because it's one of the ones we do the least of, particularly during term time. Exploring is really important for our mental health. It gives our brain new inputs, new stimulus. It might be sights, sounds, smells, experiences, and that fresh stimulus sparks creativity. It sparks focus and energy in a way that nothing else really does. And it doesn't need to be a big holiday or an expensive day out. It might just be trying a new route on your morning walk, or going to a different park with the dog or the kids. It could be picking a new cafe instead of your usual one. It could be driving 10 minutes up the road to a village that you've never been round, or going to a different town that you're not used to. Something that is a new experience, exploring something new. And again, it doesn't even need to be going places. It could be a new recipe. It could be a new cocktail. It could be a creative project. It could be buying yourself a new perfume. It doesn't matter. But these new experiences are so nurturing and energizing. That's the important thing. They're energizing for the brain. Whatever it is, these little changes are going to give us a sense of a buzz, right? And a sense of clarity and a sense of energy and joy that's really hard to find when we stay stuck in the same 4 walls all summer. Like I mentioned earlier, nature. That's the third one. R-E-N, nature. If you only do one thing other than getting a really good night's sleep this summer, make it this. Get yourself outside. I cannot even begin to tell you the power that this has on everything we're talking about today. Spend as much time in nature as you possibly can. Sit under a tree. Look up instead of down. Honestly, next time you go for a walk, look up. You'll be amazed at what you see. Notice what's around you. Take in the quiet, gentle sounds of nature. Don't just go out and have a podcast blaring, unless it's this one. Don't go out and have your music on full blast. Listen to what's around you. And we know that the outdoors has this profound impact on our mental health and our energy levels. And it's thanks to a few chemicals. These actions all increase serotonin, that calm, contented chemical, and decrease our stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. It doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be fancy. You don't need to buy an expensive tent and go camping, or hike up a mountain, or travel to some forbidden hidden cove on a paddleboard in the sea. Just be outside, like even in your own garden. That is going to help. The next one then is going to be unplug. Now, got to try and not launch into a full anti-social media around here. Like, I use my phone like anyone else. In fact, I probably use my phone more than most people because it's a huge part of my job. And I'm not suggesting that we all delete Instagram and go and live in caves. But if you've ever noticed that scrolling for just a few minutes has somehow turned into 45 minutes, and you come out of that feeling groggier, more tired, disengaged, unmotivated, and almost like weirdly disconnected from the people and the world around you, then this part is going to be important for you. The truth is, with your phone, it's not relaxing you. It's not. It's not doing anything positive for your mental health. It is just distracting you. The pings, the dings, the pictures, the colors, all of these things increase the levels of our dopamine, our focus, drive, and reward chemical, but they do it for very little effort. So your phone isn't giving you entertainment. It's not giving you something. It's actually just draining your energy. And the problem here is that not only does it give you a lot of reward for little effort, which makes you feel less motivated and more lethargic in the long term, it also increases your likelihood of comparing yourself, and it speeds up your perception of time. And I don't think any of us want the holidays to go quicker. If in fact, if anything, we want to slow the summer holidays down. Even if you can take half a day without your phone, or just a screen-free morning, this can make time feel slower, and it can help you regulate your central nervous system and feel genuinely really rested, not just distracted from what's bothering you. It can help you take real action on what you might need to work on to feel rested. You'll notice things that you usually miss. You'll feel more present. You'll feel like you're back in your own body again and you're living your own life. I cannot push this point enough. Please distance yourself from your devices. It is going to really help. And finally, then we have emotional connection. And this isn't just with others, but it's also with yourself. Sometimes it's talking to someone face to face, on FaceTime, over the phone, whatever you can manage. Sometimes it's writing a letter, and I've done this with a few clients, of someone you can't speak to, either because they are no longer with us or because they are too far away or whatever else. Writing a letter can be really powerful. It could be journaling. It could be saying something to someone that we've been meaning to say for ages. And if you're like me, sometimes it's not about talking at all. It's about listening. So sitting with your thoughts in the quiet, processing all of the emotion and the experiences from this year, and then getting them out in a way that feels safe. All of these activities are going to increase the levels of oxytocin, that bonding, that love and connection chemical in your brain. And that's going to leave you feeling calmer, more supported, more connected to people around you. And the last thing I want to finish off and leave you with today is this idea that putting yourself first, and rest in particular, is self first, not selfish. I want to acknowledge that it is an obstacle that we often face when it comes to anything related to self-care, right? It's this idea that we've internalized this idea that anything we do for ourselves is taking away from others. But mental health and well-being, it's not a zero-sum game, right? It's rest isn't indulgent. We shouldn't just push through. We don't, when we receive, when we give to ourselves, we're not always causing someone else to lose out. As I say, it's not a zero-sum game. There aren't winners and losers in this. It's so important that we are all supported together. If we're completely honest with ourselves, we all know that constantly giving out has diminishing returns. And you would have felt that across this academic year. I think it's safe to say, if we don't choose to slow down, we will be forced to. And it never happens at the right time or a convenient time. And what's more, putting ourselves first, as I say, it's not selfish. It's self first. So when you take care of your own energy, you are then able to show up with more patience, with more presence, and more capacity for others. And that's what creates, as I call it, the well-being ripple. It positively impacts the health and happiness of absolutely everyone around you. And it also gives others this gift that so few get to receive, which is a good example of how to set boundaries and how to balance work and well-being, along with home and health as well. Let's not forget that you deserve to feel good. Life is too short not to have joy, to not enjoy it. You are a human being, you are not a robot. And whether it feels comfortable to admit it right now or not, work is not your whole life, and productivity cannot and isn't going to be your entire personality. So let's all stop waiting for exhaustion to force us to rest. Let's start building it in this summer holidays. Let's take one small step at a time, and let's put our needs first. Right, team, thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope that has been insightful. I hope it's been helpful for not only giving you a really practical framework to help you really rest, but hopefully also giving you a few mindset shifts there as well. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one. Have a great start to your summer.